Awesome. What's up, product leaders? Come on now. This is like a room with the best product thinkers in the world. Many of my mentors are here. People who I have stalked on the internet forever are here. So I need a little bit more energy. What's up? Good morning, product leaders. Way better, way better. So I'm honored to be here to talk about building products and new and emergent platforms. I think this is a topic that we don't talk about enough in Silicon Valley, and I'm going to start off by telling you why. So let's discuss context. So these are the top mobile apps. These are the apps that we know and we love and we use every single day. These are the home screen of 3 apps, and look, YouTube is there, so I'm not picking on any apps. No love, no hate, no judgment. But look, what do you guys see in common? Just talk to me. Talk to me. It's visual. You see people. What about the nav, the UI? It's all the same. You got home on the right. You got all your nav tools on the bottom. You got the feed in the middle, super visual, all stuff's kind of basically the same size. At the top is all the creation tools. You got search, etc. It looks pretty similar. It's standard. Capture tools. YouTube on the left, Instagram on the right, Snapchat in the middle. Looks pretty similar. The circle kind of works, it looks like. I took photos of my computer keyboard, so it's super interesting to look at. Shopping. Here we have the shopping apps, so not just to pick on social apps. Some stuff in common, right? Like you got the hamburger. Some people call it the 3 lines. Search bar in the middle. Shopping cart on the left. And then just for fun, stories. Right? So we know how that thing worked. Stories is like this standard now. And it's the same thing with hashtags, with @ mentions, etc. So the point here is that building apps in a mobile world is pretty standard. And I just lost the screen here. Okay, I think you guys are fixing it. Okay, cool. I think they're figuring it out in the back. So building apps are standard. Right? It's pretty straightforward, and this is true across the mobile world. It's also true across YouTube. So YouTube mobile, YouTube desktop, you got YouTube for the living room, YouTube TV, right? So if I joined YouTube to lead product for one of these teams, and frankly any other team at YouTube, then I would have had a set of constraints that are standard across YouTube, and it's important. It's important for consistency. It's important so users know what to expect from you. So this is YouTube on flat surfaces, but I didn't join YouTube to build YouTube in a flat 2D world. I joined YouTube to become the YouTube of VR. And so at the time, this was like this crazy thing, right? Like there were a couple startups, this is 2016, there were a couple startups that were already claiming to be the YouTube of VR. And our team was just starting, right? So we were a couple engineers. I joined to lead product and to build a team. But it was just like not even clear what this meant, right? So the challenge ahead of me was to figure out how to take YouTube in a flat 2D world and build it for these things that are immersive, right? These things that you put on your face. And so how do we take an experience like that, and what does that really mean, right? All the constraints that I had operated throughout my entire career were now gone. And I had this massive canvas that literally surrounds your head. And that's true for the UI, and it's also true for video. So I'm also responsible for immersive video YouTube. So that's 180-degree video, it's 360-degree video, it's all 3D video, spatialized audio, ambisonic sound, stereoscopic content. I can get super nerdy on y'all. So That was a challenge. And so what I'm going to talk to you about is if we take a step back and extrapolate my past 2 years at YouTube, all the things that we've learned, what are the 3 things that I want you to know about building new products and emergent platforms? So the first is to leverage the power of prototyping to establish a baseline set of principles. So for us, this meant like every single day, we literally had to like hack together stuff. And in VR, that's pretty challenging. And then literally experience the headset in the app like at all times. So that meant everything I previously believed about height changed, and we came to an understanding of like what it meant. So stuff that is above your head had a certain definition. Stuff that's below your, like at eye level, had a certain definition, and the stuff that is below you had a certain definition. And it's like there's a correlation that we were able to draw. So stuff that's above you is like unreachable, it's hard, it's like this kind of commanding thing. Stuff that's at you is on par, and then stuff below you. And it's the same thing with distance. So stuff that's close is like super intimate, it's like in your space. Stuff that's further away, it's kind of hard to reach, it's unapproachable. It's the same thing for scale. So stuff that is, again, really close could kind of, and small can feel like little pesky rodents or animals. And then stuff that's kind of further away is like intimidating. And so if it's closer, that means you kind of need to give it more attention, right? Like your animals need a little attention. And stuff that's like further away is like powerful, intimidating. And so all these insights led us to this new UX model, right? And the first kind of insight here is like we could really separate some of the stuff that you have to do every single day from the things that you can just sit back and consume. So that meant separating the UI, separating this browse panel from the video. It also meant that we could be kind of fun and flexible, right? So we do this thing which we call on hover of the input, summon to attention, right? And so that just creates this experience. It makes the app feel alive. And that was all based on the set of principles. And that's true for input as well. So for VR, for the first time, you have this thing. It's like there's difference between tracked and untracked input, right? So if I have controllers in my hands, I could just move them around. They're tracked based on sensors. Or I could use untracked input, like a gamepad, in which case I have to like plop from left to right. My hands now matter in a whole new way. And then there's also this thing called gaze UI, right? Where I literally, as I move my head, the environment can respond. So I was putting headset on every day. The big insight here was like, wow, moving my head around a lot means my neck muscles need to be really legit strong. And so we moved away from that model because it's just hard. It was hard to do, right? And that's stuff that doesn't come unless you just put it on. I would have thought gaze would have been the easiest, right? I just move. But you don't want to move a lot. So building in VR means that you now have to like completely abandon all design standards and principles. It's like building a mobile app back in 2005. It's really fun, really cool. But this is just true for new platforms, right? You abandon the things that you knew to be true previously. For us, there were no input paradigms, no standards. And the other thing is that nausea can occur. So this is a downside with rapid prototyping. I spent many nights and evenings feeling very sick, sacrificing my own wellness for my users. This is a whole new level. And the nausea comes from what's called motion to photon latency. And so that's the time from the moment in which you move your head to the moment where what you see catches up. And that latency is based on performance. So we learned that we had to have a threshold of 60 frames per second in which our app could not drop below. In the moment that it does, then people get sick. So that's the first thing. Just establish those baseline principles. The second thing is to revisit your strategy regularly. And so we learned from Marty, my hero. I've literally read everything that Marty's ever written and published. And so obviously difference between vision and strategy, and here with strategy, like you have to be willing to revisit it. So the vision stays the same, but the strategy has to change, and you've got to be ready to pivot. And this is particularly true for emergent platforms. So if you think about technology and the technology adoption curve, so on the y-axis is US penetration rates by household, on the x-axis is number of years. So I have here in blue is color TV for the folks in the back. Yellow is PC, mobile phone is kind of orange, internet's green, and VR is red. So basically, like if you're within the first 4 to 5 years, then that means the technology is going to continue to evolve. And what mattered a year ago, like probably won't be true today. So that set of assumptions is going to change. So for us, that's like literally the headsets. So in 2014, the only headset that was in the market was Google Cardboard. 2015, there was only one headset in the market, and that was the Samsung Gear VR. 2016 was the emergence of what's called 6 degree of freedom headsets, which track your movement translationally. 2017, 2018, now there's this whole emergence of standalones, right? These all-in-one headsets that are untethered, that don't require a phone. Oculus Go is one, the Lenovo Mirage Solo is another. And so the headsets that had dominant market share just 2 years ago are completely different from the headsets that matter today. And so for us, we had to completely change our strategy and adjust to this ever-evolving landscape. And that also means for big companies, you have to spend a lot of time managing up, because the metrics that the company evaluates success upon just won't be true for products like mine. Okay, now the third point. There should be a regular cadence of usability studies. So after you kind of get above that 60 frame per second where you're not making people sick, then it's safe to bring a bunch of folks into the experience, a bunch of externals. So, at a place like Google, we could start with people who don't work at YouTube and bring them in, and eventually we'll bring in externals under NDA. So you guys know how this works, right? You bring folks in, but the key here, the real insight here, is just the cadence in which we operated. So Monday, we would put together a plan, make sure the build was stable. Tuesday, we bring in all these folks, 1 hour at a time. We take a bunch of notes. In between, we're iterating, we're making changes to the product. Wednesday, we take that time to improve the stuff that is just flat out broken so that we have super solid usability. Thursday, we bring in more folks. Friday, we finish. And then the next week is just massive sprint. And then we do the same thing. We start all over, right? So basically, every other week for the first 6 months, right before launch, we're bringing in people. And so we're testing 2 sets of things. We're first testing basic user journey. So all the stuff that is just required, stuff that people have to do every day. Can you play a YouTube video in VR? We're also testing stuff that is sucks, that's just hard to do, but people have to do. It's these critical tasks. It's can I log into my account? Can I switch accounts? Because usually people will have one VR headset per household, and they share. And then we're also, for every week cycle, we would have a theme that we were testing. So for example, we would take input modalities, right? And that's how we learned that gaze was just too hard for people. So this regular cadence of user studies literally led to a ton of insights. The middle is my team. That's us in the lab hammering it out. And the pictures on the side are externals. You can't see their faces to protect the innocent. We have them just looking around, and you could see how crazy the app experience has been and how it evolved. So in the end, we landed at an experience that really mattered. We learned that the environment was immensely important. It wasn't just about watching the video, but it was about feeling like you were there, right? Which is the goal of VR, and the environment helped us get there. It had to matter, but it had to disappear when users play a video. We learned that immersive video was incredible inside of VR. That's just awesome. But we didn't expect 2D video, meaning flat, rectangular video, would also be great in VR. And it's just awesome. So we had to build and adjust our app experience for these longer sessions. People would start off with like the immersive stuff, and eventually they just wanted YouTube. So they were logged into their own account, and they would just be watching like their regular YouTube feed. And so what that meant was that we had to, and sorry about the wording there, but we had to make sure that people could easily adjust the UI to adapt. So when people are in long sessions, they tend to kind of just like lean back. Maybe they're in bed or on their couch watching content, and they really want to see it like on the ceiling as they're laying down. People like to multitask. That was another huge insight. So this is really a first in VR where people can both watch content but also browse and search for content at the same time. And then the final thing is that voice is almost just magical in VR. And it's a natural input paradigm. So voice search was actually the best and most delightful way that people could search for content. So it didn't stop at launch. So we launched, it was great, but we learned that we had to get feedback forever. And that meant we did a 9-month study right after launch. 90 participants, representative of our user base, all over the US. And every month we would send them surveys, we would call, our user researcher would interview them. But then we also did a series of home visits. Members of our team traveled all over the country every single month and sat with people in their homes. And so that's how these pictures were taken. So I'm proud to say that as of today, I can officially claim that YouTube is the YouTube of VR. Thank you so much. This was our journey from a 2D flat world to one that's immersive. We are literally the #1 app on every VR platform where we've launched. We're leading across every potential metric: time spent, engagement, retention. It's awesome, but as we know, VR is still very early, but we believe that the future is bright. So I actually think I have time for a couple questions.
Questions?
I've got a question for Erin.
Kenny, here you go.
From a content perspective, is there something that people should be doing to create a better VR experience that gets put out?
Yeah, so
Or can they just do the normal, record themselves on YouTube?
Yeah. So obviously I'm biased, right? I own immersive video at YouTube. So I think that what really shines and works well is 360-degree, 180 2D content. The reason that we launched 180 is because it's actually easier to create. With 360, there is no behind the camera, right? So like traditional production techniques just don't work. So in creating VR video, we want to make sure that people have behind the camera. 180 videos are basically 180 cameras are basically cameras where there's 2 lenses that are what's called IPD width apart. So they're basically kind of like your eyeballs, and they capture the world as you see it, right? And so that is what we are banking on. That's where we're seeing YouTube creators make the easiest transition from traditional 2D content to immersive content.
All right, last question. Here we go.
You mentioned that the normal success metrics in the business don't hold true for this. I'm curious how you handle that.
Yeah, super controversial. So I basically had to convince our leadership, and I think this is just true in general, but it's the basic principles of the innovator's dilemma, which is like, look, if we continue to operate based on these success metrics that had been true, that drive our business, then we're just operating on like this 2-dimensional world, right? And for YouTube, there's certain metrics that just work across all of the traditional video platforms. And for us, like we wouldn't matter. So like, if we're measuring ourselves on those dimensions, we're just not gonna matter. But that's what helps drive and optimize the business over time. And so I essentially just came up with a set of new metrics that I believed were super important and got buy-in.
Awesome. Let's give Erin a warm welcome.
Thanks for having me.